Do you dream of adding your very own book to the collection of books that have already been written? Do you wonder where to start or how to finish? Does the idea of writing a book seem too overwhelming? Do you just want to polish up those writing skills or stay motivated? Do you wonder what to write about? Everything you need to help you write, stay motivated, and self-publish your own book is right here on one channel. And why? Well, because it's time to get over the writer's hump and just do it. You can write anything. Yep, you can write a book. Hello and welcome to A Book. We have a great show for you today. We have some wonderful information coming your way for anybody who is interested in writing a book. If you are just beginning your career as an author, if you have questions, if you are wondering what the writing process is all about, this show is for you. And today we have a very special guest. His name is Wayne Terrell. Wayne, did I get that right?
It's Termel, but that's okay.
Termel. Oh, boy, and I told myself I wasn't going to mess up somebody's name. That's the only thing you own for real is your name, right? Your house can burn down. You can lose everything.
Pretty much.
The only thing you have left is your name. So make sure I get it right. It is Wayne Termel, and Wayne is with us today to talk about his books. And Wayne and I are going to have a conversation about writing, right?
Yes, we are, darn it. I love talking writing. I love geeking out about it.
Oh, yeah, me too. Me too. I love it. So before we get too far into this, I want to give you a chance to let everybody know what your books are about, what you are about. Tell us a little about you.
Yeah, I am writing now at this stage of my life mostly to save what's left of my sanity. I left Canada in the early 90s. I was in show business. I was a stand-up comic, and then met my wife in LA, and suddenly there's a wife and a child and they insist on eating. And so I ran away from the circus and moved to Chicago, where I started writing. I've actually written 9 or 10, depending how you count them, nonfiction books. But about 8.5 years ago, I got it in my head that even after all that, I was never going to be a real writer until I did a novel. And so that was my first novel, The Count of the Sahara. My first 3 novels, Count of the Sahara, Acra's Bastard, and Acra's Orphans, were all historical fiction. And then I did kind of a 180 and started my urban fantasy werewolf PI series with Johnny Lycan in the Anubis Disc, and then Johnny Lycan in the Vegas Berserker, and soon to come and close out the trilogy is Johnny Lycan and the Last Witchfinder. And
we are going to talk quite a bit about those Johnny Lycan series today.
Right? Yeah, I live in Vegas, and we're digging life and talking to you, and how bad can it be?
Yeah, it's good times. So you said that you wrote a whole bunch of nonfiction before you started writing fiction. And that resonates with me because that was my journey as well. I had 7 nonfiction books before I ever did my first novel. And I just recently released my first novel, my first fiction novel. And now I'm working on another novel and 2 more nonfiction books. And I don't know what my problem is. I can't seem to just have one iron in the fire. I have to have many,
I call it literary ADD.
Yeah. I like to bounce from one thing, and I don't know about you, but I wake up in the middle of the night with these ideas and it's like, oh, I want to write about that today. Or I'll be thinking about part of one of the stories I'm writing on. It's like, oh, I've just got to get to it. And then I have to pause for a little bit and go back to it. And I don't know. It's just, or the opposite can happen. I sit down, especially with nonfiction, I can sit down and just vomit out words for hours on end until within a matter of days I can have a book done. So it really just depends on what I'm.
I find nonfiction infinitely easier, actually.
Yeah, because you're speaking from experience. There's no, or at least for me, there's no character development. There's no plot development. It's just a lot easier. But that's my take on it. Some people would disagree with me.
Well, of course they would, because everybody's journey is different. And everybody's process is different. I mean, I get asked all the time, tell me about your writing process. And I go, why? Because nobody else can do it this way.
But tell us anyway. Tell us about your writing process anyway.
I, I'm going to stick to my to my fiction work because that's more fun to talk about.
It
And
is.
the fact is, I write 750, 800 words every week for the blog, for our company's blog, which, times 52 is a book a year, right? So the
Right,
material,
right.
it's a matter of repackaging it. And also I'm used to writing in kind of small fragments. So you just put enough of those small fragments together, you have a book. With fiction, I find it different. I grab a, well, this is actually the pad in question. You can see very easy to read scrawl and markings. And I brainstorm things out, and the same way I did in high school when I was doing my homework and I had a job in a chicken restaurant, and I would do my homework in my head as I was washing pots. And then when I sat down to write it, it just kind of all poured out. And that's the way I write. I noodle and I think and I kind of lucid dream
Uh-huh.
stuff until
Yeah.
I have a head full. And then Saturday morning, I'll sit down at my desk and and out comes, 2,500 words.
Yeah.
Um, that's
So
how
do
I do
you
it. That's
do
not how
you
everybody.
do you do your character development and your plot outline as you go, or do you actually write it all out first?
I usually, there's a very good process called the 90-day novel, which I used to do religiously, Alan Watts' book. I don't do it anymore, and it's kind of
Okay.
bitten me. But I usually have notes on a couple of things, and I know where the book ends and where it where it begins and where it ends. And there are a couple of plot points along the way that I know. And then I break the book up into chunks and I write through that chunk. So I kind of know macro where I'm going. I know none of the details, but then I'll say, okay, by the first three chapters, I need to be here.
Oh, okay.
And I go, okay,
I
that's
want
where I
to
need to be.
I want
And
to circle back to something. You mentioned 90-day novel.
yeah,
Yeah. So this is the first I've heard about that. Maybe you could share that with our audience. Tell us a little bit about that, what that entails.
it's funny. And now Alan owes me money. It's funny. As I told you, I used to be a stand-up comic, and
Yeah.
there was this guy on the circuit who I knew and was friendly with. I didn't know him well, but an odd little man named Alan Watt. And it turns out that just as I was doing, while he was stuck in hotel rooms in northern Alberta in the middle of winter with nothing to do except wait for the show, he wrote a novel,
Oh,
which was very well conceived novel called Diamond Dogs. Um, and it was very widely praised and whatever. And he systemized that into the 90-day novel and now does workshops in LA
okay.
based on that. And when I was writing Count of the Sahara, I said, I have no idea what I'm doing. I need a book to help walk me through it. And there are a dozen books that tell you how to do this. But one of them was Alan's. And I thought, well, I know Alan, I'll do that. And it's been very, very helpful. And he takes you through a lot of character work, character development, plot development, understanding your themes, all that good stuff before you ever sit and write the story.
Huh,
Now that
interesting.
I am 6 novels in, I do less of the pre-work than perhaps I should, but the process is still the same. I,
Okay.
I know who the character is. I know who the main 3, 4 characters are. I know kind of what are the major points. I don't know it all. And I occasionally get surprised. Uh,
My brain does that too. It surprises me a lot.
it just will not behave. Um, but that gets me started.
Okay.
And I
All
find
right.
it extremely,
So
extremely
then
helpful.
I know you are working on the third book in your trilogy.
Yes.
You said that you're not sticking to this 90-day process, but are you still implementing then some of the
Oh, sure.
techniques that you use? Let's talk about that for a minute. I'd like to
Well, it's
show
a
the
little bit
audience.
easier. It's a little bit easier in a trilogy because
You already
usually,
have
with
the
the exception of
characters.
the
They're already
antagonist, you know
developed.
who these people are.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. And that makes a lot of sense. It really does. Did you find the second book to be easier or harder than your first?
Ah, second books are tough. Um, it was tough here because I knew that there were more books to come, right? So I had to take, and I cheated. In order to do that, I actually took Johnny out of Chicago and took him to Las Vegas so that there was a time limited period in which he was there that he had to solve the
Okay. Well,
problem. And
I asked the question because now I haven't written a series, but we had a gal on by the name of Julie Pennington. She wrote a wonderful book called Traffic.
Mhm.
Just a week or two ago, she was on the show, and she is now working on the second book of the series. And she said that the second book has been a lot more challenging to her than the first one, that she had some different fears about it because she's kind of over the fear of, will anybody like my writing? Is my writing going to be rejected or accepted? Now it's more, will it live up to the first book? So did you go through some of
well,
that
that's
too?
always a concern.
Yeah.
I don't know about you. The voice in my head is a real jerk.
What do you
Um,
do to squelch it?
I would I have told people in my business life that I would fire any manager who talked to an employee the way my brain talks to me.
Oh boy.
Uh, Imposter syndrome and all that stuff is extremely real. There are challenges with a second novel. You don't want to repeat yourself. I mean, I find myself,
Mm-hmm.
kind of building up to the same joke kind of thing, and you can't reuse that. And you have to be consistent in some things, the character things and little phrases and the way that that character talks is still the way that character talks, and that
Right.
needs to remain consistent, yet there has to be enough new to keep people reading.
Yeah. So
So
what a
it is a
challenge. I mean, that
challenge.
it does. It sounds like quite a challenge. Before we go any further, I want to show our audience. Um, let's just see if we can't get over here
I know what you're
to,
going to show. I'm very excited.
yeah, I don't know either because hang on just a second. Let's get over to this screen share here. So well, my taskbar covers up the screen whenever I try to share it. So let me get there just again and we will get to the right screen. All right.
By golly, look
So
at
there
that.
we go. Look at that. Johnny Lycan. Now, Johnny Lycan and the Last Witchfinder. Tell us a little bit about this book. This says book 3 of the Werewolf. So is this the third book in the
This
series?
is the third book. This is
Okay.
the grand finale
All
of
right.
them
Well,
all.
let's see if we can't find, look here.
Look
I
at that,
click
ladies
on
and
this.
gentlemen.
I bet you. Tell us which one was first
Okay,
and
so
kind of
Johnny Lycan in
give
the
us a
Anubis
thumbnail
disc.
sketch of these stories.
Johnny Lycus in the Anubis disc uh, introduces us to Johnny. He's 30 years old. He's kind of been a ne'er-do-well most of his life. He collected money for bookies, and then his conscience got the better of him, and he went and built waffle huts out in the hinterlands for a number of years. And now he's just got his PI license, and he's trying to he's trying to adult, as my daughter says. Uh, and so he's this new PI and he's very excited. The only problem is he's also a werewolf,
Uh-oh. That
which
creates some
complicates
dilemmas,
things.
right?
It complicates things. And so he has one case, he makes his first big money, and he comes to the attention of a mysterious multimillionaire who wants to pay him more money than he's ever seen to work for him and find and reclaim stolen relics, articles of arcana. And Johnny doesn't believe in the occult, even though he's a werewolf himself. He thinks he's the weirdest thing out there.
Okay. All
And
right.
he's wrong, as it turns out.
What
So the
made
Anubis
you what
disc,
made you decide that he should be a werewolf? Where'd that come from?
It came from a couple of things. One is I literally had a dream. I know how corny and hokey this sounds. Uh, I had a dream about a detective fighting a Russian bad guy, and the guy was a werewolf. And I woke up laughing. I thought it was hysterical.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
But it goes back, to be fair, I have to give credit where credit is due. Uh, there was a writer, McCallum, his name is escaping me, who wrote a book called The Wolf's Hour, which I read back in the 80s.
Okay.
And the way I describe the book is he's a secret agent. He's a secret agent fighting Nazis in World War II. He's a Russian secret agent fighting Nazis in World War II. And he's a werewolf. It's like, if that's not the coolest book you ever heard of, I don't know what is.
So you had to write this book. I mean, obviously, when a dream comes to you, it means something, right? It was
does.
destiny.
And so Johnny is a mix of The Wolf's Hour and the Dresden Files.
Oh,
it's
how
very
fun. This probably was a real fun series for you. That sounds like a lot of fun to write.
Somebody explained it to me, and my series is a little bit like methadone for Dresden fans. It's like, well, it's good enough that it'll get you through the fix till you get your next hit, right?
I like that. I like that. Not the real thing, though, right? So,
well, okay. So now it's my own.
So
thing.
The trilogy here. The third book, is the third book out? I guess
third book is available for pre-order.
Pre-order, okay.
It is officially out May 5th, but see, this is kind of intentional, and this is why I'm talking to you now, because a lot of people are afraid to start series. George R.R. Martin scarred them for life, where they read through the game, the Song of Fire and Ice and all that good stuff, and suddenly, they're left hanging because the books aren't finished. Yeah. And I have done that in the past and chose not to do that to people. So, book one was the Anubis disc, and book two, Johnny gets sent on what is supposed to be a very simple mission to Las Vegas, runs into the Vegas Berserker, and that happens in book two. And in book three, Johnny's back in Vegas, and somebody is stalking the paranormal community in Chicago. Oh, by the way, they've kidnapped his boss. And so Johnny has to solve that. So in
book two, you took him to Las Vegas. Does he go back to Chicago then?
He goes back to Chicago. Okay. Little piece of his heart is still in Vegas. We don't quite know what's going to happen with that as book three starts.
Okay. And I love the cover. Did you design these covers yourself? Did you hire someone? Okay.
I did not. I learned with my first book that I cannot be trusted.
Yeah, I'm not a graphic designer by any stretch of the imagination. I just don't have those artistic abilities.
I believe that publishing at its best is collaborative. For example, the voice in my head, besides being a jerk, has no taste. And so, I need other eyes on my work. I need people to say, no, that doesn't work as well as you think it did. My first book, which became Count of the Sahara, which I'm very proud of, the original title was awful. I am ashamed of the original title. My original idea for a cover was terrible.
Yeah, I have one of those. I do. My very first book, the very first book I ever wrote, and I say this all the time, was a piece of garbage. It really was. I didn't know what I was doing. It has a lot of mistakes in it. It wasn't written well. The cover does not at all match what the book is about, because I didn't have resources. I didn't know where to go for help. I didn't know that other people could make the cover for me. Like, I just didn't know any of this stuff. So one of the reasons why I like to have conversations like this with writers is because there may be somebody else out there who's thinking, well, I really want to write a book, but I don't know what to do. I don't, So how did you find resources? How did you know to get somebody else to help you in the future
Well,
with your
I
book
had
covers?
been through the nonfiction process a multiple number of times, and that helps, right?
Right.
I mean, on the surface, the process is the same. You write a book, you find somebody who cares enough to publish it, you design a cover, you do
Hmm.
the publicity, you know,
Right. All of
lather,
that.
rinse, repeat. Now, with fiction, it is different, to be sure.
Mm.
It's much easier to sell nonfiction, frankly. Um, so I'd been through the process. I understood how the game was played. But the first thing I did, and the first thing I recommend for everybody, is while you are in the writing stage, find a writers group, find a tribe, find a group
Yes.
of people who you can
Yes.
hang with.
Yes.
Originally, I started with a group just outside Chicago. And then when I knew I was moving to Las Vegas, first thing I did was get on Facebook, find writing groups in Las Vegas, uh, and say, hey, I'm moving here. Can I come hang? And they welcomed me. And,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, and not only were they my first friends here in Vegas, they started the basis of our social lives here. Uh, but I all the time that typing is lonely. They always say writing is a lonely business.
Oh, it
No,
is.
typing is lonely. Writing is social. You need to bounce things off people. Matter of fact, when we're done here in a couple of hours, I'm going to my writers group, Sin City Writers, and I have a short story that I'm bringing in and putting in front of people and saying, "Do you like my baby?" And they're going to say, "Yeah, kind of,"
Yeah.
or they're going
And
to
that,
tell me
let's
my
talk
baby
about
is
that for
ugly.
just a minute. That can be a pretty intimidating or scary process for somebody to share their work with somebody else. I think as human beings in general, most of us have this, whether we recognize it, whether we display it or not, most of us have a fear of rejection. That's just human nature.
Oh
And
yeah.
it can
Who likes to be
spill
rejected?
over, right, and it can spill over into our talents, whether that's writing, um, baking. I like to bake. I love to bake, and I love sharing my baking with people. Fortunately, they don't reject it, they eat it, so that's a good thing. But writing is a little bit different because we are sharing so much of our soul in the things that we write, and to have somebody say, what goes on in your brain, can be a really scary thing for some people. So,
You know, it's funny. It's where does the feedback come from? Because what goes on in your brain is two different questions depending on how you ask it,
it is.
right? If
Yeah.
you go, what goes on in your brain?
Right.
That's very
Where's
different
the
than
emphasis?
what goes on in your brain. Like,
Right.
what are you thinking? What were you
Mm-hmm.
thinking?
Mm-hmm.
That what was your intent? Those are legitimate questions, right?
They are.
Because
Yeah.
if I know what you're trying to do, I can tell you, yeah, for me, you hit it or you didn't. I'm very lucky in that I have been speaking in public since I was 6 years old and performing for the public since I was 18. And doing stand up, you learn to handle both rejection and feedback very quickly because the
Right there on the
is
spot.
instantaneous.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and they will tell you, this is funny or this is not. And very often they're drunk and not friendly when they do it. So you learn to accept feedback. The way that I explain it to people, and this is a discipline, it takes discipline to take feedback.
It
You
does.
need
And I
to
want
be
to say
used to it.
this. I think if anybody wants to become a good writer, they just have to learn to accept feedback. And sometimes that means accepting what they might perceive as negative feedback. I think it was Tom Lucas maybe who said that there was a difference between being criticized and criticism, or critiquing. So
Absolutely.
you
And
have
I
to
actually
learn to
tell,
get some critique. My brain is my brain. That's it. And I may be thinking, wow, this is a home run. This is great. And somebody else or somebody else's, many people might be reading it going, huh, this really stinks. And I don't know that until I
well, because
hear what it is that they're saying that for.
you can't be an objective judge of your
No,
own work.
absolutely
Either
not.
you think it's brilliant and nobody can touch, which is the problem with self-publishing, right?
I think
Is
so.
that people who think they're brilliant have no barrier to entry, and some of them maybe should get some feedback before they publish. And that being said, there's the other side of your brain that says everything is crap and nobody's ever going to want to read it and this is
Yes,
awful and
yes, it's
whatever.
not good enough. And so
And
we,
so
I mean, we can have a
feedback,
debate all day long about whether self-publishing is good or not good. I am
right? But we're talking about
definitely
feedback, right?
right, right.
And I need to kind of be very clear about something. The most important thing you can do, and the first readers group that I was in was very strong about this. Once you've read your piece, once you've handed your piece, you were not to respond while people gave you feedback. You
Hmm.
had to shut up unless you were asked a direct question.
What
If
a
somebody said, why did this guy do this? You could answer it. But if somebody said, well, I don't like this sentence, you couldn't immediately leap to it and become defensive. So you
that's a
have to learn to shut up and take it. And here's the truth of the matter. There are 3 buckets of feedback that you get. And the first bucket is a very small bucket.
mm,
And it's, holy cow, you're right. I never thought of that. Oh my God, that's brilliant. And you get some of that. It's a very small bucket. You get very little of that. There's also the bucket of, I need to think about that. Maybe you're right. Maybe that's the wording. Maybe it should be something else. Maybe that isn't as clear as it could be. Okay, and that's a big bucket of stuff that you need to think about. And ultimately, some of that you will take and some of it you will not. And the third bucket, which is by far the biggest bucket, is thank you for your feedback. You're an idiot.
so
And there is a lot of that. Not all the feedback you get is valid.
well, it's true. And
And
just as much as your as writing is subjective, so is the interpretation of that, you know.
well, it's funny. Our writers group is all kinds of genres. And so, you know, somebody with a sci-fi background is going to read things very differently than somebody with a romance background or a literary
Completely. Hmm.
background. I mean, I brought in all kinds of short stories and I brought in Johnny Lycan in the early days, and that's urban fantasy. There are tropes, people that don't read urban fantasy don't understand some of the things that happen, whereas people who read it all the time go, oh yeah, I see what you're doing there. Okay, cool. Right? So you've got people who don't read your genre, who don't understand that. So their feedback is going to be tempered by that. You've got people, frankly, aren't as talented as you are. I mean, that sounds arrogant and awful, but not everybody is equally talented. And
Yeah.
if you've read enough of their stuff, that's going to taint the value that you put on their feedback,
Yeah. So
right?
what would you say to a brand new writer who is just starting out? They have their first story, maybe it's a fiction story, and they're afraid to show it to somebody. They're afraid because they're afraid of that rejection. What would you say to them?
Yeah. First of all, nobody has ever died from a bad review. You may wish for the sweet release of death, but you're not going to get it. You're going to get your review, and people are going to say, and if it is done as most critique groups are, most feedback groups are very positively inclined. They want you to be, are legitimately trying to help you, and hopefully they give you positive as well as negative feedback to balance it out.
My goal when I was writing and getting things published was I just don't want to embarrass my family. I don't want this to be so bad that when I'm dead, my family reads and goes, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe mom posted that," or published that. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
That's kind of my goal. But I there's feedback that I think can be very helpful to a new writer, and it's exactly
Mhm.
some of the stuff that you're talking about. And then there are things that I think unintentionally, because people are sensitive, that they can take the wrong way. So to say to somebody, to say to a new writer, I'm sorry, but I just think your book stinks, that's not helpful and that's not encouraging. But to say, I think you could improve in such and such an area, that's helpful.
The way that I do, and fortunately, I mean, one of the things I teach in my big boy life is leadership skills, and important to that thing of that is giving feedback. So let's look at how do you give feedback to an employee, right? You don't say you're an idiot, you're on, do it like this. That's not what you do, right?
Right.
So when you're giving feedback to a writer, and a lot of new writers don't feel like they're qualified to give feedback. And it's like, no, you're not passing judgment on it. You're not deciding if it gets published. You're giving feedback. So here's a couple of things when you're doing that. The first is start with what you liked. I like the idea of the story. I like where it went. That's very cool, right? That's a good place to start. Or I like that you have all these cool turns of phrase. I really like that. Then you get to, here's what I think you might do differently. How do you frame it, right? You're not telling them what to do.
It's that compliment sandwich.
I think this, well, no, but it's not. We can argue about the compliment sandwich all day long.
Yeah.
Because I'm not saying that you have to say something nice and then you say something nice at the end, like that's going to take away all the crappy stuff you said in the middle. That's not how life works. But you say, here's what I might do differently. And you lay it out there, and they have the choice. They can do it that way or not. But the thing is, when you're giving feedback, here's why I might do it differently, or here's what I might do differently, and here's why.
Give an explanation with it.
Okay. I think if you leave this dialogue the way it is, people sound the same. I don't hear a difference in the way they're talking. Mm-hmm. So I might make one person better educated than the other.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So that they use different vocabulary and they sound different to the reader.
Right. Yeah.
That's feedback you can use.
You said something, even a new writer can give advice because we're all readers. That new writer is still a reader.
Exactly right.
And so if I'm going to share my book with somebody, I don't care whether they are an author, whether they've ever published anything. I want to know how it sounds to them, how they interpret it, so that I know if my intention is clear. That's what the purpose of feedback is.
Yeah, exactly right. And, you know, it sounds awful because I have had 16 books out in the world, right? And because this is my 6th novel, sometimes newer members of the group are reluctant to give me feedback.
But they're still readers.
But they're still readers, and they have a valid opinion. Again, there's 3 buckets of stuff, right? Mm-hmm. I may choose to put it in the, oh, that's adorable, but no bucket. But I have to be willing to listen to it. Yeah. I have to be willing to hear the feedback. And so that rule that we had in our old group where you have to shut up, I really, really take that to heart. I really try when people are giving me feedback, even if I think it's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard, I take my notes and and I thank them for the feedback.
Yeah. And I out of curiosity, have there been times when, as you are getting that feedback and you're thinking to yourself, that's ridiculous, they don't know what they're talking about, that later when you go back and you're looking it over, you think, well, maybe there was a little bit of validity to that?
It has happened, and I will tell you that if 3 people give you the same feedback, you need to listen to it.
There's something there.
Well, I'll give you an example because this happens all the time, mostly with white men. We get told, oh, that piece bothered me because, right? It didn't sound right, or it comes across as sexist, racist, whatever. Well, if your character is a sexist and racist, then good. I did what I wanted to do.
Because that's right. There you go.
If my character is not sexist and racist, and if that was not my intent, if more than one person got that impression, I need to hear that. I need to take that seriously. And maybe I need to take a look at that with fresh eyes.
Yeah. Yeah. So my last book, I had several people look at it. And I was looking for some more negative feedback. I know that sounds very silly, but
No.
everybody looked at it and said, "Oh, it's great, nice," Um, but there wasn't. I wanted more constructive criticism. I did get some. I did. I'm really fortunate. My neighbor happens to be an English professor, and so I got and he used to be an editor for a publishing company, so I got some of that mechanical feedback that I needed. But as far as the story and character development, I was kind of looking for a little bit more. Like, does this really make sense to you? What did you get? What was your takeaway from this? And I think sometimes people are afraid they're going to hurt your feelings.
Well,
You
they
know?
absolutely are. And that's why you need to choose the people who give you feedback very carefully. A writer's group is full of people who want to be
Who
writers,
want
and they
to, and they want to
generally
be
tend to
better,
be.
and everybody there
So
wants
that's
to be
why
better.
taking it to someplace else, right,
Yeah.
is good. Now, you may find you're not getting the quality of feedback you need. I'm finding myself looking for a little higher level of feedback. So maybe that original group I've kind of outgrown, and maybe I need to find a few like-minded
Well,
souls or whatever.
I don't know, because remember, your feedback is valuable to them too.
Yes,
Yeah.
and as in any relationship, are both sides getting value from it,
Yeah. Yeah. There has to be some
right?
give and take going on there.
I'm willing to take one for the team and offer feedback, but I expect feedback that I can use in return. If I'm not getting it, maybe that's not the group for you,
Could be, could be.
right?
I love the idea
So
of a writer's
that's,
group. I just love it. I think it's great.
but it's so important. And there are online writers groups, and they all operate differently. And I'll tell you the exact
They do.
situation I'm dealing with right now. My story is 4,000 words. We go to our writers group, and you read for 10 minutes. That's about 1,800 words for 10 minutes. It's going to take me at least 2, probably 3 weeks to get all the feedback on this story. And people who read part 1 might not be there for part 2, and
Mm.
people may be coming in the middle and not
Oh
getting the
boy.
full thing.
Yeah.
Maybe I
Mm.
need feedback from people who are willing to sit. I've got a couple of friends. We've got a Google set up, and I'm going to put the whole story up there so they can read it in one swoop, so that they know where it's going, they know what was said and what wasn't, and they can give me feedback on the whole.
The whole
Does it
thing.
hang together?
Yeah.
Does it
Yeah.
make sense? Does the
Yeah.
plot work? Because getting it in 1,500 word chunks, even if they're the best
And the
editors
mind
and feedbacks
forgets.
possible, they
Yeah.
don't know. They haven't got.
Right. And the mind forgets too. Like you may,
Absolutely.
we may pick up on key things during that 10-minute reading, but then 3 weeks later, when you're reading again or whenever it is, you may not have recognized something that was missing because you didn't remember everything.
Yeah, precisely right. So if you're doing longer pieces, and then this is also true once you're done, right? Forgive me, I dropped my microphone here. Once you're done the piece and you're ready for beta readers need to be people who can give you feedback. My wife is a lovely person. She is an intelligent human being. She is not by nature a reader. She can tell me I liked it, I didn't like it, I laughed, I cried, it was better than Wicked. But the truth of the matter is, her feedback doesn't mean a whole lot unless she hates it with the white hot heat of a
Yeah.
thousand suns. I'm not getting a lot of valuable feedback from her.
Yeah.
Your
Yeah.
beta readers shouldn't be your friends and neighbors and people who have a stake in making you like them.
And it's interesting that you say that, because on the I have an opposite situation. My husband reads, not kidding, about 100 books a year. He is a reader. And so he was real quick to say, this doesn't make sense. I think you need to change this. Have you thought about this? What about that? And at the same time, still be encouraging.
Right.
He didn't just slam it all together. He said, this is really good. I like the idea. I like the story. There's some things that need to be better.
Right.
So,
And I'm not
yeah.
saying don't show it to your spouse,
No,
but
but
what
you
I'm
do have
saying
to
is,
know, you have to know the people who are going to give you the feedback that's really going to help your piece shine,
Yeah.
not just
And some
people
of
who are
that
going.
is give
So
them the
I
guidance.
think what happens, and I say this from personal experience, is it's we want to pick the people in our lives who are not going to hurt us with feedback, right? They're not going to hurt us. And this is just human nature. My degree's in psychology, so I'm gonna fall back on that. Um, so we have a tendency to choose people to show our stuff to that we know is going to be a soft landing for us, but that's not always the best thing for us if we want to grow in our craft, right? So
Yeah, some of it is we're looking for a soft landing.
learning to accept critique that is beneficial is, I think, in my opinion, the sign of a truly good author, somebody who really wants to put some good work out there. And I'm not saying that that trumps talent by any means. You still have to have some ability. You still have to have some talent. You still have to have a good story to present out there. But the willingness to get better at what you do is invaluable. And I think a lot of people shortchange themselves because they're afraid that if they show their work to somebody, whether it's a beta reader or they take it to a group, that nobody's going to like it. And that translates to nobody likes me.
Yeah.
That makes
You got to
sense?
separate the work. And
Yeah.
this is hard. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I write a lot of short stories, and almost everything I write is in first person, which is a weird trait of Wayne, but it's true. 90% of the stuff I write is in first person. Well, some of the people in my stories are not, and they are despicable people who do bad things. And when you're writing in first person, I feel like I need to put a disclaimer at the beginning that said the opinion of the characters are not necessarily those of the management.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's part of it is if you can divorce the characters and the work from you.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
That's such
They're
good
not
stuff. That's
saying
good stuff.
you are terrible. They're saying this sentence really makes no sense.
Right. Right. Oh, that's such good stuff. That's very powerful. Yeah.
You've got to be able to separate the action from the person,
100%. Yeah.
which is why I like that phrase, what I might do is.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's so good. So good. We are going to do another screen share here. I want to let people see your website. And you've done quite a bit. I was going through your website earlier today, and I was so impressed with some things. So you have this is the homepage, and you do some blogging. You've already mentioned that. So this is the homepage. This is the cover here is of your
Third
new
book.
book that's coming out. This is the third one. Yeah. Yeah, this is the third one. And then you have some blogs in here. Again, I just love this cover. I think it's phenomenal. You've done a
Dave
wonderful job.
King at Black Rose Publishing has done a really, really lovely job of the covers.
I need to tap into that. That is really good. And so there's some blogs here and then some information about you. Look at that. That is great.
Look at that face.
Yeah, some information. And I love this. I really like going to authors' websites because, you know, when you read a book, especially when it's been good, it does make you curious about the author and you want to know them. It makes you want to at least feel like you're connected to them somehow. And you've done such a wonderful job with this website. You
Oh,
really
thank you.
have. It's great, wonderful information about you. So I want to encourage everybody, if you're looking for some of Wayne's books, you want to go over to wayneturmel.com, right? And go check this out. And here's a list of your books, some of the different books that you have. You said there's 16 that you have written. Are they all on this website?
They are so not.
No, they're not. Okay. All
There's
right.
my first three are the historical fiction, uh, Count of the Sahara, and then uh, Acra's Bastard and Acra's Orphans, which was an unintentional series. It's a
Oh,
pair of
okay.
books that work together, and then the Johnny Lycan stories.
Okay. Which has been your favorite to write? Which was your favorite?
Oh, mercy. It's like, which is your favorite kid?
Fair question. Fair
It depends
question.
on, and the
Yeah.
answer is it depends on the day. Um,
Yeah.
I my first novel was a real passion project. It was about a historical figure that, as it turns out, now I am probably the fifth most expert person on this person in the world.
Wow.
Because
That's
he was
exciting.
so not very
Which
known.
book was that? Which one was that?
This was Count of the Sahara.
Count of the Sahara. Let's go back to that. Okay. And what was
Yeah,
that
there was
about?
a archaeologist. There he is, archaeologist named Byron de Prorock, who in the 20s was the most famous archaeologist in America for about 6 months, and
Oh,
then everything blew up. Because when you are a pathological liar and a drunk, that kind of thing happens. But it was a real passion project. I adored this character. I'd carried him with me for years. And
wow.
so I have a soft spot in my heart for that novel. Um, the Luca novels, Akra's Bastard, Akra's Orphans, are just flat out adventure stories. If you think
Okay.
about Kim, Rudyard Kipling's Kim, it's about a young Crusades who gets recruited as a spy.
Oh boy.
And
Okay.
it's a lot of fun. And then, Johnny like it, I have no illusions that Johnny Lycan is silly fun. And that's what it is. It's jelly beans. It's not great art, but they're darn fine jelly beans.
So did you bring a lot of your comedic humor into those books?
Well, that's what actually made it easier for me to write Lycan. Because when you write historical fiction, there's certainly humor. I find humor in everything. It can't be helped. It's the nature of what I do. But if you write historical fiction, in order for it to work, the jokes must be suitable to the time.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think I
They
was
have to be appropriate to the era in which you're writing about, and they have to be appropriate characters, right? An
oh,
11-year
absolutely.
old half Syrian, half French orphan is going to find some things hysterically funny that a grown up would not find amusing,
Yeah, yeah. And you have to know
right?
that. So there's some research. There's some
Oh,
research that's involved
and
in
I love the
understanding the
research. I'm a
cultures and
huge,
the history and the times.
yeah, I'm a huge geek. I love the history.
Yeah.
The research can, take you down some serious rabbit
Mm.
holes. Whereas at least with the Johnny Lycan stories, it's modern day, right? It's 2024
Yeah,
Chicago, and people talk like
it's
that.
whatever world you create.
And people talk like that. The only thing is, and this is another thing that writers groups are good for, is especially in the first two Johnny books, people were really saying that sounds more like Wayne than it does Johnny.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um,
Good
I have
feedback.
to remember that Johnny is only 30 years old.
Oh.
Basically, he's the lunkheads my daughter dates. I am twice Johnny's age, you know?
Oh,
Uh, so the expressions that I use, the jokes that I tell, those things are going to be different, right? I'm
of
inside
course.
Johnny's head. It's first person. I cannot be anybody but Johnny.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and
And so
it's
there's
it
some
really
good.
is no different than an actor trying to get into character, you know?
It's exactly what
Yeah.
it is. It's there's method acting. I like to call it method writing.
Mm-hmm.
In some ways, first person is so natural for me because it's an exercise in empathy. I put myself in that character,
Oh, I love that.
and then as you're writing the plot, right? Nothing can happen that character doesn't see.
Yeah. Oh,
Nothing
that's great.
happens
That's
off
good stuff.
stage,
Good stuff. Good stuff. Yeah.
right? It's a very not everybody likes it and not everybody can do it. I think I do first person really well, um, which is why I write it as opposed to other stuff.
Yeah. Cool. We're going to go ahead and take a look at your Goodreads site here. Again, I want to just encourage people to check out your stuff. I really do. Great stuff. So this is your, what are we on here? Let's see. These are your books?
No, you probably want to go to my
Oh,
books.
I'm in the wrong spot. Nope. Oh, it
No,
won't let me.
la la.
Yeah.
Don't worry
Yeah.
about it.
We'll have
I
to,
have a Goodreads page. Check it out.
yeah. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and send people then over to your website or to Amazon. So because I do want to make sure that they have access to these books. So let's do that. Let's get them over to Amazon here. Okay. So if you are looking to get any of Wayne's books, definitely get on Amazon or go check out his website for sure. And that's wayneturmel.com, right? So they can see the other books that you have also, because right now we're just showing them this series here. And I'm kind of interested in reading some of these. I think these look like really fun books for me. I think I would enjoy
I
that.
I'm very proud of them. When I switched from historical fiction to urban fantasy, at first I was afraid to do that because they say, you got to have a brand and readers need to know. And what am I going to do? Tick off both my readers?
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah.
And
So
my
that's
ego won't allow me, my ego will not allow me to write under a pseudonym.
yeah. So I'm laughing here because that's something my husband keeps saying. You need to have a brand. I'm like, but I want to do 9 different things, and I can't put them all under a
I
brand.
figured it
I have
out.
just so many different ideas.
The Venn diagram of if I look at people who care about running good web meetings and people who care about orphans in the Crusades and people who care about werewolf detectives, that that Venn
A little
diagram is
spot.
a
Yeah.
very thin slice of humanity.
Yeah, but you're reaching them, right? So if they
I,
care
I
about
hope
that and they
so.
like it, then your books are for them.
Well, my
Right.
greatest hope is that no matter where they start with my stuff, they have enough faith that I am a good writer and will not let them down, that they will take a chance on maybe something they wouldn't read.
So when this trilogy is done, when you are done with this last one, are you considering a fourth? Are you,
Not
or do you
in
have something
this.
else in your brain that you want to do?
Well, I have a thousand things in my brain, which is the problem. I actually have written a screenplay for Johnny Lycan,
Oh, how fun.
uh, which I'm trying to share with the world. There is a character in the third book that I think if the books continue, it would be a different series. And I think Casper would
Oh,
be the hero of those.
oh, okay. So just a spin-off. You're talking about a
I think it
spin-off.
might be a spin-off.
Yeah, how
But
fun.
I've got a Foreign Legion story that I'm kind of kicking around. I've got a bunch of stuff in my brain. So I don't know what's next
Yeah,
right now,
yeah.
actually.
Just kind of taking it one day at a time and see what happens, huh?
But I hope if people like my stuff, they'll stick with me and go for the ride. Like, hey,
Yeah,
this is kind of cool. Check this out.
yeah, yeah. I don't see why they wouldn't. You're a delight. And I'm
Well,
excited about reading these books. I truly am.
as
Yeah, what
Dorothy Parker said, I agree with you, but who are we, right?
love it. Love it. All right. Well, before we get off here, this has been a really fun conversation. I've enjoyed it a lot today. Um, before we get off here, what would you like to leave the audience with? What is one thing you would like for everybody to take away from today's conversation?
Besides by Wayne Tramel's excellent books.
Do that. We're going to make sure people do that.
I think the big thing is, if a writer, find other writers. That is so important. They're the only ones who know what you're going through. Your
Mm-hmm.
family and your friends love you and they'll support you, but you're probably not going to get rich and you're not going to make a lot of money, and people who
Yeah.
don't write don't understand process. They
Yeah.
don't
Let's touch
understand
on that briefly.
how that
There is
goes.
such
And
a
so
perception, I think, that's been put out by Hollywood and other books, that
well, we were
writers,
lied to.
we were told you write a book and you're going to be this famous author and you're going to make $1 million, and that's not the case. That is such a small
You
majority
write
of
a book
people.
and they send you on these fabulous book tours around the country, and you wind up in a big country house with a giant library,
Mm,
and you get up in the morning and you get to write all day, And,
Yeah.
we were lied to and we
Yeah.
fell for it. And now
Yeah.
we're in too deep to get out. Let's
Yeah,
face it.
yeah, 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 yeah. That's just it. The whole glamour of it is made up. It's fantasy. It just doesn't really exist. That is not to say that it is not rewarding and satisfying and such a blast. I love writing. I do. I enjoy it. My favorite part, of course, like I think most people, is when I finally get a copy of that book in my hand when it's been published and I have a copy of it and I can share it with the world. That's my favorite
That
part.
new book smell
Yeah.
never gets old.
Oh, it's wonderful.
Get
It
that
is.
box
I
from
think
the
you have to
printer.
have just enough of an ego and you have to want just enough attention that that part is important to you. Otherwise, I don't think you press on.
Probably not. Well, I mean, you got to remember that 3% of people who say they want to write a book ever attempt it.
Mm.
Less than 8%, fewer than 8% ever complete a book.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so just getting that in your hand, the best analogy I can give you is back in the early 90s, I was on Jeopardy, which had been a lifelong dream. And I got stomped. I got humiliated in public.
Wow.
And people said, people will be so impressed that you were on Jeopardy, they won't
Yeah,
care how you did.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah,
And
so it's
that's
interesting
mostly
that
true.
you use that analogy because, well, I've never been on Jeopardy, so I am impressed. But it's funny how many people say, "Oh, you're an author. You've written a book. Oh, that's so cool." And they have this idea that I am somebody or something that I'm not. I'm just somebody who sat
Bless
down with a
their
typewriter.
hearts.
Yeah,
Bless their gullible little hearts.
I
They're
know.
so
I know.
impressed with us.
Isn't it great? It's wonderful. So, all right. Well, listen, I would like to direct everybody just once again over to this Amazon account here, and we're going to take a look. You can go look for the Johnny Lycan series, and you can pre-order book 3. This is book 3 in the series, and again, I just love that. Wayne Trammell has written this series, and so there are 3 books. Tell us the titles of those again, just real quick. Just name them off.
Johnny Lycan and the Anubis Disc, Johnny Lycan and the Vegas Berserker, and Johnny Lycan and the Last Witchfinder.
All right. So yeah, so go on over there to that. Or if you don't want to do that, then go on over to his website, waynetrammell.com, and get the books. And you have some really interesting stuff. When I was going through the website, I was like, some of those things are some I'm
interview a
very
lot of
fascinated
authors.
in. Do you?
I interview a lot of authors. That's fun for me.
Yeah, it is. I love talking to authors. I do. I love talking to writers. Obviously, here we are. It's a lot of fun. So, well, I thank you so much for being with us
Thank you for
today.
having me. This is a blast.
Yeah,
and I
this has been
appreciate
great.
it.
And we're going to have to do it again for sure, because I think you have so much to say and you have so much to contribute to the writing world.
Having stuff to say has never
Yeah.
been my problem.
No, but you do have a lot to contribute. You have experience, you have knowledge, you have insight. And so I kind of want to talk next time we get together. I'd like to hear more about some of your nonfiction books, because as I was perusing the titles of those today, I think we have some things in common. And so I'm interested in hearing you talk about some of those later.
Sure.
But in the meantime, the 3rd book in your trilogy is going to be out pretty soon, and I want people to jump on that while they can. Go ahead and pre-order. Get the first 2 so you know what's going on, and then pre-order that 3rd one.
And don't worry, the series really is over.
Is it?
Yep.
Okay. All right. I believe you. I do. You're in control. So I believe you. Well, listen, you've been watching a book today. We've been talking to Wayne Trammell, who is a fantastic writer and has some wonderful things out there. Go on over to his website. I just want to encourage you, if you are out there and you're wondering what the writing process is like or what it would be like to write a book, you can do it. There is nothing stopping you. Anybody can write a book. And I thank you for being with us today and being a part of this conversation. Have a great day. God bless you.